You had those who would be clever in trying to pick up pieces from the past, adopting pieces of this and that, but they would never go any place with it. If you're going someplace with it, you're going to come into a challenge, and the challenge is the future. The only way you can be a scientist is to be future-oriented, not deductively oriented. You cannot learn from the past. You have to challenge the past, defy the past. And if it's the desire to defy the past, to get to the point where you think you can defy the past, and going into the future. So what is your mission? What are you going to do now that you didn't do before? Why are you going to do that? To what purpose are you going to do that? How are you going to change society? And this is gets you into areas which, in terms of the psychology, behavior psychology, is very interesting. There's a fundamental difference between the person who's trying to show from a accumulation of experience that they have succeeded in solving the problem, and they can stop there. The person who's actually creative never stops. They're always discontented with what they've accomplished. They're restive. They don't want to stick to what they've accomplished. We fixed that already. That's enough. Come on, let's go on. Let's get to the next step. And you want to move people to do that. That's a form of leadership. And that's what political and economic leadership really is. You are never accepting what you know. You always are trying to go to a next step, an experience that you never knew before. It's like, mothers giving birth to babies. They don't stop making the babies. Why? The inspiration is there. That's the future. You name them by what? What year? Age? Progress. And it's entirely in that area that you have the failures we've seen, for example, in our own organization. People who were bright, but they didn't want to go to the future. They wanted to stop and rest on their laurels, so to speak. And they would always go in sense perception, or they would pick something out of the blue and try that. But that's this question of the future, of progress. For example, what's killing the world today? What's killing the universe today? From Britain, essentially. What's killing the universe is green, the green philosophy. That is killing humanity. If the green philosophy were to pervade in terms of mankind, even without thermonuclear war, you would have a human extermination, a human species extermination, without progress of that type, without creativity. So the practical fellow is a danger to himself, because he wants to stop at certain fixed assumptions and say, this is what I believe, and don't try to change me. The person who's really creative and progressive wants to change himself or herself all the time. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they would get terribly bored.
I think Einstein has a famous quote. He says, "I want to know God's thoughts. The rest are details." Of course, Einstein is
yes, exactly
persecuted for that way of thinking.
Well, that's our problem right now, is a political problem in general. We're dealing with right now, we'll take the case of the election campaign. Well, you got two jerks, one evil and one just a jerk, as presidential candidates. The evil one is the real Democrat. Mm-hmm. The jerk is the typical Republican, with a few exceptions who actually are intelligent. And there's also some Democrats who are intelligent, but they're hard to find. Mm-hmm. Or they're hard to smoke out, shall we say. They don't want to admit that they're doing it. And that is exactly it. The idea of principle corresponds in human experience to the ability of true creativity, which is to leap to the future. And define a principle by leaping to the future. You never get to exhaust the principle. The principle itself, creativity, is a principle of itself. But if you were raised to like and to depend upon the discovery of principles, of true principles, rather than deductive deduction method, then you have creativity, unless it's crushed out of you. And the problem is we have a society, we have old young people out there. They're more dangerous to themselves than they are to anyone else, but they're dangerous to adults. You have teenagers and people of even younger age group who are inherently a danger to the population because we have destroyed the population by the cultural changes which have occurred since the assassination of Kennedy, in particular, exemplary. We've lost it. Only a few of us still have it. And these guys are running around, rolling around. You have presidential candidates running around. And we are actually on the verge of destruction of the entire population of the planet because of thermonuclear weapons. But we get into the thermonuclear war. Why? Because we have this problem. We have people who are acting more like animals than they are like, they have nuclear weapons, thermonuclear weapons, but they're acting like animals in terms of every other respect of their behavior. And the problem is we have to fight against that, but the other side of it, for the purpose of this discussion that we're having today, the question is the fight to get creativity in the way that Kepler defined the problem in terms of his discovery of universal gravitation. That is, I think, the classical test, which is the easiest one to get at. It's difficult, but it's the easiest to get at. And the lack of that, the rejection of Kepler's work and the systematic throughout the entire system, that rejection defines the self-destruction of mankind. It defines Newton. It defines all the fools of science. And it also defines in the other way. It points out who the true geniuses are. The ones who aren't content with any achievement except discovering the future and making it work.
I think with a great space policy, too, you start to create the challenge such that there's no way that you can say, that there's no way to deny that these are the type of discoveries that need to be made. Where you push the frontier saying, okay, we're going to do this. This is what we're going to do. We're going to colonize space. We're going to come to the point of a human society that really was envisioned by Kennedy even. And in that process, then, you start to pose the challenge to everyone, all the way down to the kindergartners and so on, such that you're doing, it's a top-down process of society.
Well, to take one practical case as an illustration of this, what happened with curiosity is that we reached a point with the success of that experimental work, which is a higher step upwards in the whole process. Even though it's a limited mission, it has that characteristic. But once we set that quality of material up and anticipate where we can go further with it, we suddenly have not only a radiation from Earth's direction into Mars, we also have a reflection of the reverse. Mm-hmm. Now, if we take the apparatus we put on Mars, which we're receiving communications. Communications by what? By what means? By what? Solar radiation, similar kinds of things, speed of light. Well, what if we put a reflection of that on Mars? Mm-hmm. In the same place we would tend to put curiosity. Well, now we've got a two-way view, and when we're trying to track out these satellites, which are killers, if we start taking, and you simply mirror the speed of light communication of Earth to Mars, mirror it back, and direct it in various ways, you have a new way of trying to locate the patterns which are determining the behavioral patterns of all these missiles that are flying around out there in space. It's the fate, when people who don't want us go ahead and do the obvious. Once we start to put things on Mars, which are systems of curiosity and beyond in terms of mission-oriented capability. So we put some things up there with mission-oriented capability. Then we say, well, what if we just reverse this? Why don't we bounce it back from Earth and bounce it back in the direction to Earth from Mars? Why don't we put stations out there and create a network to get enough points in the system that instead of trying to pick out each one of these little satellites, you can pick out a pattern in the satellites, and it derives a certain number of points you have to get to. But you have to get a broadcast from Mars back to Earth to be able to do that. If you want to defend Earth, you have to do that because you need something you can control. You've got to get a point out there you can control and play it back. And in that way, if you can now work from one point, Earth to Mars and Mars to Earth, now you can bounce it around in various other parts in terms of the system out there. You begin to find patterns. You get clues as to what you might be able to do. The same thing applies to this comet problem. If we could get a couple more points on a comet and observe it more closely, again, the same thing. But all it takes is the overcoming the tendency of people not to leap ahead of themselves, the tendency of people to go by approximation in a single direction or along a single road, and not stop and say, let's look at this, let's be self-critical, and tease ourselves into forcing ourselves to make a discovery, to generate a discovery, by frustrating ourselves. And if people are creative, that's what they do. They go at problems that they can't solve, and they say, wait a minute, this isn't working. We've got to do something else. We've got to reverse this. We've got to go backwards. And that's what the creative person does. They say, well, this isn't working anymore. Why isn't it working? It was supposed to work. And creativity is simply that future orientation. When you think you've mastered something, you've got it working for you, that's precisely the time to take warning. Maybe this is a mistake. Maybe this trip is the wrong voyage. Maybe we should have turned back and checked something on the way. It's what you do. You always get in science to a point of frustration. A frustration point is approaching. You get disgusted with something, or you don't like it, or it's not working for you. And it's like a warning. Better wake up, go take a nap, and then come back and start again. Or both take a nap, because you may forget it, what you're trying to think about. And that's our problem, is we have suppressed the promotion of genuine creativity in the school systems, in everything. We've created a system of monotony based on zero growth. And with zero growth, there's no incentive to create. And that's our job here and elsewhere, wherever we have the ability, is to do exactly that, is to force the preconditions, the precursors of creativity, which we've been struggling to do in this shop we've running, is exactly that. Force the precursors of creativity. Don't be satisfied with anything except creativity. The person who's actually creative never stops. They're always discontented with what they've accomplished. They're restive. They don't want to stick to what they've accomplished. We fixed that already. That's enough. Come on, let's go on. Let's get to the next step. And you want to move people to do it is to be future-oriented, not deductively oriented. You cannot learn from the past. You have to challenge the past. Defy the past. And it's the desire to defy the past, to get to the point where you think you can defy the past. Areas which, in terms of the psychology, behavior psychology, is very interesting. There's a fundamental difference between the person who's trying to show from a accumulation of experience that they have succeeded in solving the problem, and they can stop there. You had those who would be clever in trying to pick up pieces from the past, adopting pieces of this and that, but they would never go any place with it. If you're going someplace with it, you're going to come into a challenge, and the challenge is the future. The only way you can be a son and going into the future. So what is your mission? What are you going to do now that you didn't do before? Why are you going to do that? To what purpose are you going to do that? How are you going to change society? And this is get you into